Happy Tuesday evening, everyone. I hope everyone has had a pretty decent day. This has been a pretty decent day. Not necessarily long. I'm busy. I've been able to get multiple shows in today. So this one is interesting to me, and I'm going to make an argument that what I'm describing here is treason. But first, just a little background. Every so often, you'd be surprised what comes out on like a Tucker Carlson show, where he's interviewing his guest, and the guest just says something, and it's like, wait a minute, I think that guy just said something, significant. Well, this took place with him having a conversation with former deputy assistant director Terry Turchi. He's having a conversation with him, and he makes this point of when he was in the FBI, his job, to some degree, was to keep progressives and socialists out of office. He's like, what? Are you saying that your job was literally to turn the United States government in on itself and to attack elements of the U.S. Or people who are trying to get into the U.S. government, to essentially attack the government itself and people within the government? Yes. Now, Tucker Carlson didn't ask that secondary question. At least I don't think he did. But this clip is damning in regards to what the FBI's role was back during the Cold War, and not just back during the Cold War, up into recent times, seeing as this guy's not 100, 200 years old. Let's take a look at the clip and go from there. Yeah, I could do it this way.
Blood has to be to react to stories. So you're going to see more stories planted so that all these committees can have a lot of work to do. And I think this is just more of this issue. When you take the election and you take the House and you now convert all the committees that you have to investigating various aspects of the President of the United States, then your lifeblood has to be to react to stories. So you're going to see more stories planted so that all these committees can have a lot of work to do. And I think this is just more of the same. And I think we can expect more of this because, quite honestly, the electorate in some places is putting more and more progressives and self-described socialists in positions. And ironically, years ago when I first got into the FBI, one of the missions of the FBI in its counterintelligence efforts was to try and keep these people out of government. Why? Because we would end up with massive dysfunction and massive disinformation and massive misinformation. And it seems to me that's where we're at today.
That's amazing. Did he know that he was saying that in the external world? Like, does he believe this video is taking place in a phone booth? And maybe, I guess, you have the impunity to say it since there's not going to be any consequence in you saying it. Let's hear him one more time, though, just so you can hear him for yourself. I'm not putting words in his mouth.
More stories planted so that all these committees can have that you have to investigating various aspects of the President of the United States, then your lifeblood has to be to react to stories. So you're going to see more stories planted so that all these committees can have a lot of work to do. And I think this is just more of the same. And I think we can expect more of this because, quite honestly, the electorate in some places is putting more and more progressives and self-described socialists in positions. And ironically, years ago when I first got into the FBI, one of the missions of the FBI in its counterintelligence efforts was to try and keep these people out of government. Why? Because we would end up with massive dysfunction and massive disinformation and massive misinformation. And it seems
a mission of the U.S. government was to keep lefties out of governmental positions. That is profound and amazing. That is amazing. And I'd argue treasonous. Let me review this part first, just so we're clear on what we're talking about. This is called Law and Crime. It's a blog. It's a political blog, or you could say a legal blog. And they kind of took notice that he said this also. Like, whoa, This guy just said that the FBI, that its job was to keep lefties out of office to some degree. Terry Turchie, just so you know, this guy's not a nobody, is a former deputy assistant director of the FBI's counter-terror division. His swift rise in the bureau is the stuff of legend, and Turchie was the director of the task force that ultimately arrested the infamous Unabomber Theodore Kaczynski. Meaning he's not nobody. It's not some random guy sitting at a desk. If he's saying that his job, one of the main jobs that he was sit there to do was to keep lefties out of office, this is not some guy in the mailroom coming up with this. This is somebody who was part of counterintelligence and would know. Now, to some degree, this is known information. And they even go into the fact that the FBI has acknowledged, I guess you could say in part, its role in this kind of disinformation campaigns, or these campaigns in order to attack the left. And they go into it. FBI has long acknowledged previous decades worth of oftentimes unlawful surveillance, sabotage, and violence aimed at Americans' anti-war protesters, feminists, communists, and civil rights leaders. From the FBI oftentimes considered all those things to be the same. When Nixon came out with the attacking pot, or making the drug war, with this idea of locking up blacks and hippies, it's in part because they thought blacks were being motivated by communists, and hippies was part of this kind of counterculture movement. They thought they could kill two birds with one stone and split the group up. Not to mention, the moment that you get arrested, you lose your voting rights. FBI has long acknowledged previous decades, read that part, even sending Martin Luther King a letter telling him to kill himself. Yeah, that did take place. That's amazing. The American Civil Liberties Union describes some of the efforts. During the Cold War, the FBI ran a domestic intelligence counterintelligence program called COINTELPRO that quickly evolved from a legitimate effort to protect national security from hostile foreign threats into an effort to suppress domestic dissent through an array of illegal activities. COINTELPRO targeted numerous nonviolent protest groups and political dissidents with illegal wiretaps, warrantless physical searches, and an array of other dirty tricks. The FBI used the information it gleaned from the improper investigations not for law enforcement purposes, but to break up marriages, disrupt meetings, ostracize persons from the professions, and provoke targets, group into rivalries that resulted in deaths. The Church Committee, a Senate Select Committee that investigated COINTELPRO in the 1970s, found that a combination of factors led law enforcement officers to become lawbreakers. In the FBI's own words, the program referenced above was intended to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize left-wing movements and their leaders. Official COINTELPRO operations ceased in 1971, around the same time as the Church Committee's investigations were being publicized. Former FBI Director Clarence Kelly later apologized for the agency's lawlessness. Our bad. Sorry we broke up your marriage, broke up your home, and sorry these people died as a result of our activities. Our bad. Our bad. Some of the activities were clearly wrong and quite indefensible, Kelly told the American public in 1976. We most certainly must never allow this to repeat. Here's the problem. Turchie's tenure in the FBI, however, confirms that the basic thrust of the FBI's domestic counterintelligence efforts remain essentially unchanged long after the public mea culpas. According to Turchie himself, he wasn't even an FBI special agent until 1976, the same year that Kelly issued the apology, or the disavowal. Turchie's stint as deputy counterintelligence head came much later. Meaning if Turchie is right, and if his responsibility, if its role really was to break up left-wing groups and to keep these guys out of office, that means even after they came clean with it, they were still taking on some of those actions. My argument here is this is treasonous. Now, just so we're clear, I don't want, let's be specific. The crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to kill the sovereign or overthrowing the government. What about a government that's potentially going to come into force? So, the country and the elected leaders supposedly get their power from the people who are being governed. Meaning, we cede a certain amount of our agency, like our ability to kill and rape and pillage and plunder and all this other stuff, under this idea that there is more benefit gleaned out of giving up some of our freedom to a certain degree of safety. And there's always that balance between those two things. But the you could say the legitimacy of the government at that case comes from the people who are essentially ceding those freedoms to that government. Meaning that government is in force and legitimate so as long as the people and the public sees it as being legitimate. This is somewhat of an intellectual thing. There is no one building that represents the government. It's somewhat of an intellectual thing, conceptual. Now, I say that to say this. If that government that's conceptually created with all of its levers and all of its, departments and all of this other stuff, if that government has aspects of the government that is actively trying to keep certain people out of power, even though the public may want those people, meaning if the public, for whatever reasons, for political climate reasons, maybe something changes in the country that requires a certain change in the way of thinking, and the public is kind of attuning itself to that new way of thinking, and maybe that thinking is to the left. And the responsibility of an agency of the government is to keep people from the left out of office. Then the government, at that point, is essentially attacking the public itself. Because the public wants something. The public may even require something, and there are elements of the government that is actively trying to stop and deprive the government from being able to put people in office who may not just be what they want, but may be what the country actually needs. That is an amazing admission. And doing it, just going by the years, his tenure in the FBI, again, this is taking place after the mea culpas. Now, the left has always had this sneaking suspicion, and it's not a suspicion at this point because the FBI has already admitted to doing such these things, that left-wing governments are under, let's say, a different threat of right-wing governments. Meaning there's a little bit more to it from the standpoint of coups and all this other stuff. There's more concern from the left, especially with the, you could say with the previous past that the FBI has already admitted to. I am amazed that he admits to this so easily and casually, seeing as what this inherently means. The same behavior that we take around the globe, stirring up disinformation, stirring up trouble, trying to play one element against another element, maybe putting people in office that were more favorable to us as opposed to somebody else. It's similar to the stuff that we're doing here. He just admitted to it. Meaning our agencies, our intelligence agencies, were doing things to attack the government itself, or people who potentially were trying to get into the government. I'm just amazed that he so casually admits this. Am I insane for being astounded by this? I mean, don't misunderstand me. I'm aware that this stuff took place. I'm aware that this stuff may still take place. But it's something a little bit special or odd to be so casual about admitting to it. I guess that's the only thing that I'm pointing out. Charles Piera. FBI agents are struggling to put food on the table because of shutdown, and it's delicious seeing these pigs suffer. Karmic justice is amazing. The problem here is that there are also a lot of other people who are struggling to keep food on the table. You can call TSA workers, you want to say IRS workers, all sorts of people. And in February, or let's say in March, they gave food stamps and those type of benefits early because they're not necessarily sure if they're going to be able to have those benefits in given March. Fair enough if you want them to suffer, but just be clear, that's a lot of other people are also taking a hit. Intel community is a disease that needs to be purged. They're just strangling democracy. Brian Crosby. I mean, that's a yes and no thing. I mean, clearly in this case, yes. I mean, the moment that you get to the point where you see that your job is to attack nonviolent, peaceful democratic elements of your country, and your job is to somehow decapitate the democratic process itself. I mean, that's disturbing. That's disturbing. Let's see. FBI and CIA are a threat to American people. Edward Klein. October Revolution. They should be pushing leftists into government. Leftists who want to work with the system will work with them. Those of us who have given up on the electoral system are the ones they should fear. I love that. Well, y'all, your government hates leftists, not just outside our borders. Yeah. Issa Rose, they do the same to libertarians. The FBI worked against Ron Paul, and so did the Republican Party. They did work against Ron Paul. The Republican Party. You know, there was a poll where it was showing the people who were leading the fields. I think it was like an Iowa poll. And Ron Paul came in like number 2. And they pretended as if Ron Paul wasn't even in the poll. Like, some of the stuff they used to do for Ron Paul used to be amazing. It used to be absolutely amazing. Alright, I have another story after this, so I'm going to get to that story. If you guys enjoyed this content and you find yourself coming back here often, please consider liking, sharing, and please consider donating to the channel if you find yourself enjoying and digging what I put down. So, I'll see you guys in a few. Patron appreciation is going to start back next month. Putting that out here now. Things got a little scrambled when I got back into the States. So, that's going to be renewed. And my wife wants to have a patron appreciation week again. That may be okay. Sometimes those things are strained, but we might try to pull that off. But definitely, we're going to start back with the shows and all that other type of stuff. In addition to the after show. So what we just had here is, for the most part, the after show. I've given my spiel on something that's taken place, and then I give my conversation with the audience, just kind of back and forth if they have something to say about my spiel. Sometimes people think I'm an asshole and they want to go at me. In other cases, they may agree. Usually somewhere in between. So the after show is going to be something that I'm probably going to clip and going to use for patrons. So even $1 helps, and $1 will get access to the eventually additional content. So I'll leave this here. Thanks all. I'll see you shortly.